hard to parse because you're seeing GM and Ford have these, strong earnings reports, huge moves in the stock.
For decades, the pickup truck was more than a vehicle. It was a symbol of hard work, of independence, of America itself. A machine that promised freedom, strength, and self-reliance. From Texas ranches to Midwest factories, the pickup became part of the national identity. But by 2026, that symbol had cracked. The dream had collapsed under the weight of its own myth. Once a tool of the working class, the pickup truck had transformed into something else entirely. A luxury product marketed with chrome and leather, powered by debt and desire. Prices soared past $60,000 and $70,000. Financing terms stretched to 7, sometimes 8 years. Buyers weren't purchasing trucks anymore. They were purchasing a lifestyle, financed on hope. Dealerships promised 0% loans, no payments until next year, and the illusion of affordability. Behind the curtain, manufacturers quietly flooded the market, building more trucks than America could ever drive. Lots overflowed with unsold inventory. Drones and satellite images revealed acres of brand new trucks sitting in the sun, collecting dust instead of profit. Analysts whispered about a pickup bubble. Few wanted to believe it, until it burst. By late 2025, the truth was impossible to ignore. Resale values plunged by 40%. Truck owners owed more than their vehicles were worth. Banks tightened credit lines, and dealerships, once symbols of prosperity, began shutting their doors. Some filed for bankruptcy, others simply walked away, leaving behind fields of unsold metal, a graveyard of America's favorite machine. But the real collapse wasn't just economic. It was psychological. Farmers, construction workers, and small business owners, the people who once defined the truck's identity, started holding on to their old vehicles. The average age of a working pickup in the Midwest hit 13 years. They refused to buy into the illusion again. The pickup had stopped being a tool and had become a trap. Meanwhile, a new generation looked at the truck and saw something different. Not power, but excess. Not pride, but waste. Online, the cultural shift was already visible. Memes mocking oversized pickups, influencers calling them relics of an outdated dream. For the first time, owning a truck didn't mean freedom, it meant debt. Ford, GM, and Ram scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings, new electric models, cheap trims, a spiritual reset, as one Ford executive called it. But the damage was done. Trust was gone. And as economic reality collided with changing values, America's most iconic vehicle faced an identity crisis it could no longer escape. This is the story of how an empire of steel and chrome, built on pride, power, and myth, came crashing down. How the pickup, once the backbone of the nation, became a warning sign of what happens when identity, culture, and commerce collide. For most of the 20th century, the pickup truck was more than a vehicle. It was an emblem of a nation that believed in motion. The first Ford F-Series rolled off the line in 1948, sold not as a luxury but as a promise. A man could build his future with his own hands, and this machine would carry the weight of his ambition. For farmers, contractors, and small-town dreamers, the pickup became a badge of honesty. It was grease and grit and calloused palms, a rolling declaration that work still mattered. Advertising built on that sentiment. By the 1980s, every commercial was drenched in nostalgia, steel, sweat, and sunsets over amber fields. The image was so powerful that even people who never hauled a single bale of hay wanted to own one. Somewhere in the early 2000s, that identity began to mutate. Automakers realized that the working-class symbolism of the pickup could be sold at a premium. The trucks grew larger, shinier, more aggressive. Chrome grills the size of small walls, touchscreen dashboards, heated leather seats, each new model less a tool than a trophy. By 2024, the average price of a full-size pickup had climbed above $63,000, almost double what it had been a decade earlier. In Texas, dealerships advertised luxury ranch editions, with champagne-colored interiors and 22-inch wheels. A contractor from Amarillo joked that his new F-150 cost more than his first house, but it wasn't really a joke. Manufacturers fueled the illusion that the pickup was still the same symbol of resilience, even as it drifted into excess. Marketing departments coined phrases like, "built for the backbone of America," while the trucks themselves were designed for people who rarely carried anything heavier than groceries. A 2025 study by the Automotive Insights Group revealed that only 23% of pickup owners used their trucks for regular towing or hauling. Yet commercials continued to show them splashing through mud, pulling down barns, or rescuing stranded cattle in a storm. The disconnect between image and reality grew into a canyon. The transformation wasn't only cultural, it was financial. The industry's profit margins on premium trucks surpassed 25%, making them the golden goose of Detroit. Executives quietly abandoned cheaper, work-focused models, redirecting production to top-tier trims. By 2026, Ford had discontinued 3 of its most affordable configurations, while GM phased out its entire line of base model Sierras. The logic was simple. Americans weren't buying trucks out of necessity anymore. They were buying them to feel powerful in an uncertain world. What no one predicted was how fragile that feeling would prove to be. Meanwhile, in rural America, the tone was changing. In towns across Iowa and Missouri, farmers began keeping their decade-old trucks alive with salvaged parts, unwilling or unable to stomach the new prices. A 2025 Midwest Automotive Association report, later quietly retracted, suggested that the average age of a farm-used pickup had reached 13.4 years, the highest on record. Local mechanics became folk heroes, keeping the old machines running like vintage tractors. In online forums, owners of 20-year-old Silverados mocked the new models as city trucks, too polished to be trusted on a dirt road. Still, the myth of the pickup refused to die easily. For every skeptical farmer, there was a suburban buyer convinced that his gleaming, lifted Ram TRX connected him to a simpler, stronger America. It was an emotional purchase, not a practical one, a way to feel anchored amid rising inflation, political division, and cultural fatigue. One fictional but telling statistic, cited in an internal Ford memo leaked to the press, claimed that 61% of buyers in 2025 described their truck as part of who I am. That line became a quiet punchline among economists, who saw not identity but vulnerability, a consumer base willing to go deep into debt to preserve an image of stability. By the start of 2026, the contradiction was complete. The pickup, once the honest tool of the worker, had become the status symbol of a struggling middle class pretending to be strong. It still looked powerful, but it carried a silent fragility, ballooning loans, fragile egos, and an industry addicted to its own mythology. Beneath the glossy paint and roaring engines, the foundation was cracking. What had once represented freedom was now chained to the very system it claimed to defy. The pickup truck hadn't just changed, it had betrayed its own legend. And the country that built it was about to learn how costly that betrayal could be. By the time the average price of a full-size pickup crossed $60,000, the American dream of owning one had already turned into a quiet financial nightmare. What was once a purchase made out of necessity had become a calculated act of self-deception. The dealerships knew it, the banks knew it, even the buyers deep down knew it too. Yet the showrooms stayed full, and the signatures kept coming. Trucks were no longer sold, they were financed. And in that distinction lay the seed of the collapse. In 2024, the typical buyer financed nearly 90% of a new truck's price. Loan terms stretched to 7 or even 8 years, often with monthly payments higher than the average rent in small-town America. Some dealerships introduced truck loyalty financing, promising easy trade-ins after 4 years, concealing the fact that most owners would still owe tens of thousands on their original loan. The Federal Automotive Credit Bureau reported that the total outstanding debt for pickup purchases surpassed $340 billion, more than the GDP of Denmark. Meanwhile, manufacturers promoted 0% APR and Drive Now, Pay Next Spring campaigns that blurred the line between marketing and manipulation. Behind every glossy ad lay a hidden calculation. Automakers like Ford and GM had partnered with financial institutions to create captive lending arms that quietly fueled the illusion of affordability. The average truck buyer in 2025 had a credit score 22 points lower than a decade earlier, yet was borrowing nearly twice as much. Internal data from the fictional consumer finance watchdog revealed that 37% of pickup buyers qualified only through exceptional circumstance approvals. Essentially, polite code for risky lending. The industry called them stretch customers. In private, executives referred to them as lifelines, because without that steady influx of desperate borrowers, the sales charts would have collapsed years earlier. It wasn't just individuals caught in the web. Entire dealerships became debt-fueled ecosystems. Inventory was financed through floor plan loans, where every unsold truck was collateral. When sales slowed, interest piled up like snow. By the end of 2025, several regional dealership chains were technically insolvent, but kept afloat by manufacturer kickbacks and deferred payment plans. A leaked memo from one major automaker suggested that nearly 18% of all dealership loans were in special management, a sanitized phrase meaning one missed payment away from default. Buyers, meanwhile, clung to their new trucks as symbols of stability. The economy was uncertain, inflation eroded savings, and wages lagged behind the cost of living. In this landscape, owning a powerful pickup wasn't just transportation, it was identity insurance. But that identity came at a brutal cost. Late payments surged. Repossession agents described 2025 as their busiest year in decades, with some towing companies reportedly earning bonuses from banks for each recovered vehicle. A small investigative outlet in Ohio uncovered falsified repossession documents tied to one of the nation's largest auto lenders, where employees were rewarded for inflating the value of seized trucks before auction. The human side of the crisis was quieter but crueler. Families downsized homes to keep up with truck payments. In some cases, owners lived in their pickups after losing their houses. Financial counselors reported a spike in clients whose biggest liability wasn't a mortgage, but a vehicle. They don't realize it's a luxury good, one counselor said. They still think it's a tool. It was a sentiment shared across the Midwest, the belief that the truck was essential, even as it dragged its owner deeper into debt. By 2026, the illusion began to fracture. The resale value of used pickups dropped by nearly 30% in 12 months, leaving millions of owners underwater, owing far more than their trucks were worth. Online, frustrated buyers formed communities like Truck Truthers and Dead on Wheels, sharing stories of financial ruin and calling for a boycott of major automakers. Economists started comparing the pickup market to the subprime mortgage bubble of 2008. The same overconfidence, the same reckless credit, the same false sense of security wrapped in patriotic branding. But even as the numbers worsened, the marketing machine refused to slow down. Commercials still promised built for those who never quit, even as the people behind the wheel were quitting second jobs to make their payments. It was the cruelest paradox of all. The harder Americans worked to afford their trucks, the more those trucks symbolized the debt that chained them. The working man's vehicle had become the working man's burden, a rolling monument to a nation that had confused ownership with freedom. By 2026, the illusion that had sustained the American pickup truck market began to rupture from the inside. The debt-fueled sales, the inflated prices, the sentimental marketing, everything that once made the industry invincible had turned toxic. The problem was no longer just the cost of the trucks or the length of the loans, it was the sheer volume of them. Production had outpaced reality. The assembly lines in Michigan, Texas, and Ohio were running at full throttle, even as dealership lots overflowed with unsold vehicles. Satellite images released by independent analysts in late 2025 revealed vast grids of brand-new pickups parked in old airfields, abandoned shopping malls, and unused industrial parks. Some lots stretched for miles, rows of identical machines glinting in the sun, their tires never having touched a public road. It looked less like inventory and more like a silent city of metal, an empire built on denial. Automakers refused to call it overproduction. They preferred the term temporary supply surplus, a phrase that comforted shareholders and delayed panic. But internally, executives knew the truth. A confidential report from the fictitious North American Auto Coalition predicted that demand had been overestimated by 41% for the 2025 fiscal year. Dealers couldn't move the trucks fast enough, even with deep discounts. In some regions, incentives stacked so high that buyers were effectively being paid to drive the vehicles off the lot. Yet even that wasn't enough. Consumers, burdened by rising interest rates and stagnating wages, had reached their breaking point. The pickup was no longer a dream, it was a reminder of how far out of reach that dream had drifted. As the market froze, the first victims were the dealerships. By spring of 2026, over 60 regional dealers had filed for bankruptcy, with another 100 operating under emergency restructuring agreements. Their collapse rippled through local economies, taking down small businesses that relied on their traffic, restaurants, body shops, and local suppliers. The trucks themselves became liabilities. Repossession companies refused to take more because storage yards were full. In some states, dealers resorted to renting farmland to store their unsold stock, paying rural landowners just to keep the illusion of low inventory. Drone footage that leaked online showed acres of gleaming pickups baking in the sun near Oklahoma City. The video went viral, captioned simply, "This is what denial looks like." The cultural consequences were even deeper. The pickup, once a unifying symbol of American resilience, began to divide people. To the wealthy, it remained a lifestyle accessory, a polished object of nostalgia. But for many working families, it had become a monument to economic inequality. Farmers, construction workers, and small-town mechanics could no longer afford the machines that once defined them. Online discussions shifted from admiration to resentment. Hashtags like #truckbubble and #chromedebt trended on social platforms, while memes mocked oversized luxury pickups as suburban tanks. A viral post from a Kansas farmer summed up the sentiment. "We used to buy trucks to get the job done. Now they sell them to make us look like we still can." Young Americans saw the contradiction more clearly than anyone. To them, the oversized, gas-guzzling pickup represented everything outdated about the old economy, wasteful, loud, and rooted in insecurity. Surveys in 2025 showed that only 8% of adults under 30 planned to buy a full-size truck in their lifetime, down from nearly 25% a decade earlier. The cultural aura that had once made pickups aspirational was evaporating. The same vehicles that once stood for strength now symbolize stubbornness. Environmental consciousness, digital convenience, and financial caution had replaced horsepower and chrome as markers of success. Even in rural communities where tradition runs deep, younger drivers preferred hybrid SUVs or compact EVs. They didn't want to inherit their parents' debts or their myths. For automakers, this generational shift was more terrifying than the financial losses. It wasn't just that trucks were expensive, it was that people were no longer proud to own them. Marketing departments scrambled to rebrand. Ford hired a Silicon Valley design firm to redefine its truck DNA, focusing on sustainability and digital-first utility. GM launched a campaign called Redefining Strength, centered on emotional authenticity and practical design. Ram took a bolder approach, announcing a partnership with a Chinese battery manufacturer to produce an affordable electric pickup priced under $40,000. These efforts were desperate, but not entirely cynical. Deep inside Detroit boardrooms, there was an acknowledgement that the age of excess was over. The truck could no longer sell fantasy, it had to sell function again. The shift toward electrification was both necessary and painful. Traditional buyers distrusted it, seeing electric pickups as political statements rather than practical machines. Early models like Ford's Lightning had sold well to tech-minded suburbanites but struggled in rural areas where charging infrastructure was unreliable. To win back those regions, automakers promised rugged, battery-powered trucks with modular designs and self-repairing software updates. Engineers worked around the clock to produce prototypes that could handle mud, cold, and heavy loads, trying to prove that electric didn't have to mean fragile. But by then, the damage to the brand's credibility was deep. Buyers didn't trust the new models any more than they trusted the companies selling them. In late 2026, Ford unveiled its so-called Reboot series, a symbolic attempt to cleanse its image. Executives spoke of a spiritual reset, a phrase that sounded more like therapy than strategy. They promised transparency, affordability, and a return to real trucks for real people. GM followed with its stripped-down True Work line. No chrome, no screens, just functionality. It was an admission that the industry had lost touch with its roots. But even as these announcements made headlines, the ghosts of overproduction and financial mismanagement lingered. Warehouses were still filled with unsold models, credit agencies downgraded major automakers, dealers begged for buyback programs that never came. What emerged in this period was a rare moment of honesty. The collapse of the pickup market wasn't just about money, it was about meaning. For decades, the truck had been America's mirror, reflecting its values: hard work, self-reliance, and pride. Now the reflection showed something else: debt, denial, and displacement. The same vehicle that once united farmers and factory workers now symbolized the widening gap between corporate profit and personal struggle. When the trucks finally stopped selling, it wasn't because people didn't want them. It was because people no longer believed in what they represented. By the end of the year, the transformation was undeniable. The vast fields of unsold pickups stood as monuments to an era that mistook consumption for identity. Yet beneath the wreckage, a new philosophy began to take root. Smaller, efficient vehicles, many electric, some modular, started to define the new landscape. They weren't glamorous, but they were sustainable, practical, and built with humility rather than ego. The industry that once sold dreams of dominance was now forced to sell the reality of survival. And so the pickup, the once mighty symbol of American endurance, entered its age of reckoning. It hadn't disappeared, it had evolved. The roar of its engines faded into the hum of electric motors, and its purpose shifted from spectacle to substance. What began as a financial crisis became something deeper, a cultural correction, a reckoning with a century-old myth. The trucks still rolled down American highways, but now they carried a different story, not of boundless strength, but of fragile redemption. The country that built them had changed, and the machines that once defined it were finally learning to change too.